Anne Marie, can you provide background and history of the East Area Rapist, Golden State Killer, Original Night Stalker case, which is the first to use genetic genealogy in a criminal investigation?
Sure, I think it's pretty fairly well known that at least my experience with the case is both professional and personal. I grew up in Sacramento. I come from a big family, and I was a young kid, 12, when the alleged crime started in the mid-70s. And my professional experience started with that case around 2000, 2001, because we had started a cold case unit here in the DA's office back in the day. That's when I had experience doing DNA cases, and I felt strongly that we should be trying to do more work on that case, and so a lot of folks have worked on it for many, many years. So over time, lots of people have worked on it, and then obviously in the last year or so, the idea of using genetic genealogy was introduced, and we're here today with somebody now being prosecuted for that.
What did you initially think of the idea to use genetic genealogy in a criminal investigation?
You know, I mean, from my background, because I believe 100% that DNA is the greatest tool ever given to law enforcement to find the truth, no matter what that truth is. And for many years, we have, in this office in particular, with our law enforcement partners, sought to use whatever DNA we have in a case to the best of that ability, whether it's to preserve a case through doing a John Doe warrant, whether it's trying to solve a case with different ways of using DNA, such as like using paternity testing. We've done a lot of things, and we've tried to really use that DNA to the best of our ability, because in all of our minds, we know that's where the truth often can lie, whatever that truth is. And so when the idea was initially presented to us, and the credit really does go to Paul Holes on that, you know, my own attitude was, if this is a tool that we have the ability to find the answer, and I often say the needle in the haystack, why would we not try that? This is a case of historic magnitudes, and there's many, hundreds if not thousands across this country that have that same potential. So I felt that we as a team and this statewide effort, we should do everything we can to find that answer.
Kirk and Monica, what were your thoughts?
Well, when Paul Holes kind of first explained the concept to me, and I thought about it, and with Monica's Googling ability, I thought, well, we'll solve it that night. And I was a little bit off in my little overly enthusiastic, off by a couple of months on that estimate there. But no, when it was explained, the process was explained to me, I thought, oh yeah, this will work.
I had no idea if it would actually work. I mean, I was hoping that it would, because we had tried so many other things, and I'd heard of genetic genealogy and its use in helping adoptees and you know, patients with amnesia and that type of thing. But like I said, I had no idea if it was going to work. It was kind of like a wing and a prayer, but it worked.
I definitely think that the folks that came together, Kirk, Monica, the FBI, Paul Holes, you know, some genealogists that helped, Barbara Bentner, it was the perfect team in a sense, because the passion, the persistence, and the knowledge, ultimately they know a lot more now about doing this, but just the sheer dedication. So I didn't know if it was going to work or not. I had hope, because I do believe strongly in DNA, but it was an extraordinary undertaking, put it that way. You know, it's not a simple concept. I think people need to understand that. Some people think it's just a simple little concept. It's not simple. The first time I understood it, or I actually heard about a genetic genealogy, even though I feel like I have a good understanding of DNA because I've done it for over 25 years, it's different. It's different, and so you might have seen my eyes glass over a time or two, and I get it better now, obviously, but it's not necessarily simple, but it's also, it's the perfect marriage between science and law enforcement.
Can you explain the general process of how it works from DNA evidence or sample to identifying a potential suspect?
Generally, well, you first you have to have actual physical DNA, and that's kind of one of the things we've wanted to kind of make sure we get that understanding out to law enforcement, that just because there might be a CODIS profile, if you've exhausted all your DNA, you're not going to be able to do genetic genealogy. Actually,
You got to explain what a CODIS profile is.
oh, I'm sorry. So, CODIS profile is when you think of just in terms of standard law enforcement, when you see you get a DNA match, that's where that comes from. That's a CODIS profile where you put the DNA in the data bank and you get a hit. So just because you do have that profile does not necessarily mean you can do genetic genealogy. You actually have to have physical DNA. So you have to start out with that. You have to have enough, and it has to be a single source, not a mixture. But you send it to that DNA to a lab that does either what they call genotyping or full genome sequencing, and that's it's different than normal CODIS testing, which uses what they call STR testing or short tandem repeats. It's kind of apples and oranges is the way we like to describe it. It's a completely different thing. You're looking at much bigger section of DNA when you're doing either genotyping or whole genome sequence. Actually is looking at all 3 billion base pairs of someone's DNA. So, but from that, from sending that DNA to a lab that does that either genotyping or full genome sequencing, they produce a data file, just a series of numbers. It's huge. You never want to print it out because you'll kill your printer. But from that, then that's what these ancestry companies or genealogy companies and GEDmatch use to determine who you're related to. So CODIS testing is basically used to individualize a person, but DNA, STR, or I'm sorry, genotyping or full genome sequencing is telling you who you're related to, not just individualizing a person. So it can determine very remote relationships.
And is that where the tree building process then comes in?
Yes, I mean, essentially, like Kirk says, you get a genealogy profile, separate than what we call the forensic profile. You get this genealogy profile, you upload it into one of these sites such as GEDmatch, and what you're then looking for, which is the work they're doing, is, and I call it tree building, you're looking at the relationships. So you're never, one thing the public needs to understand is, we're never getting, you upload the bad guy's genealogy profile. We're not going to say, well, he's related to Mary Smith. We're never going to know that. What it's telling you is the relationship that profile may have to people in a genealogy site. And it's all about the more numbers, or what they call the centimorgans that you have, that you share, the closer the relationship. So they may find out from one of these searches that your bad guy is potentially a second to third cousin. And so from there, and they're going to tell you how to do this, that's where the tree building comes in. It's the very labor intensive part. It's the part that they've learned an extraordinary amount, I would estimate, in the last 6 months about. Fair, Monica?
So I was going to ask about the learning curve. How did you learn the process? How did you work together as you were both new to this new way of an investigation? How did that work?
Well, it definitely was a learning curve. When we first got the results from the search, I thought, I'm just going to Google these people and see how they all know one another. So I had no idea, everything that went into the research that was necessary to build family trees. But it was a very collaborative process. We emailed probably 5 or 6 times a day to our small group, bouncing ideas off of each other and helping each other if we hit a brick wall or, kind of we're in a conundrum.
This is just in general cases, right? Not
Yes.
in one particular case, right?
Yes.
Okay.
All the cases we've
Okay.
done so far,
Right.
actually. But it's just research. You have to be patient and you have to be precise.
And that's just echo what Monica's saying. Yeah, you have to be precise, because if you get something wrong, everything you do at that point after that is going to be wrong. So you really have to kind of be very careful, obviously, and that's what's nice to have a group of people working on it, because you can check each other's work, or if you're not sure, you can bounce ideas off, like Monica's saying, so that we make sure that we're getting it right.
I think the other part that, at least I've learned in terms of this research and the amount of persistence and precision that it takes is, when you think about a family, you have 2 sets of parents and 4 sets of grandparents, and as you go up that family tree, it grows exponentially. And so if you start thinking about how far, if you want to identify potentially a third cousin, you have to go up, and they'll know how far up, but you might have to go up to the 1800s. And so you're talking about, and then back in history, families had large families. They might have 10 kids, who then have 10 kids. And so, like they're saying, is if you go down the wrong branch of one side of the tree, you may be getting off on a wild goose chase. So this is where they've learned a lot. They're going to probably tell you, you can have adoptions, you can have affairs. It's a lot of those hidden family secrets that sometimes happen.
In general, when a suspect is identified, what happens then?
Well, at that point, it's basically regular police work takes over again, and you have to confirm that you have the right person. So you have to obtain that person's DNA, whether it's surreptitiously or however it's collected, and that has to be confirmed with the CODIS profile that we already have with the local county crime lab or state crime lab. So that's kind of the check and balance to make sure that that the correct person has been identified. You're going back to the normal DNA testing that's tried and true, and it's been done for decades now.
Goes back to that same thing, which is the answer is going to be in the DNA. So when he talks about getting that, he calls surreptitious, but it could be your person of interest that it falls in this tree. You get some kind of legally obtained DNA sample from that person, and then you're making that one-to-one comparison from the crime scene. Maybe it's a rape murder, maybe it's a series of rapes, and you're just comparing the profile gotten from that crime scene to the profile you've now collected, and you make that one-to-one comparison.
Do you feel like this is a valid, viable tool that can be used?
Well, I think you can look across this country since the time that the first arrest occurred here in Sacramento, which was April. We're not even 8 months, maybe 9 months out now. There's probably been close to 24 cases across this country. Some of them, if you just Google, as Monica says, have already pled out, and they've admitted or confessed, and I think all of us, and I'm sure they can tell their own stories, I think this will and has already revolutionized our ability to solve violent crime. Those of us that are DA, whether elected DAs or DAs that are, deputy DAs that work in the area of forensic DNA, we all feel very strongly, one, that we need to make sure folks understand it, but two, to also establish some kind of best practice model, because it's no secret that this firestorm of conversations start about privacy and, are we going to share people's private data? And I'm always going to go back to this one phrase, it's just we never have our hands on somebody's actual DNA profile and these numbers that Kirk mentions, it's not like I can tell you that all these numbers mean this person is predisposed to have, breast cancer, whatever it is. We never have our hands on that. But with that privacy concern, which, I understand, we want to make sure that we educate our law enforcement partners. We train them. Kirk and Steve Kramer from the FBI have done extraordinary trainings all over. I've done trainings with other DAs to make sure we understand it, and also to develop a best practice model. So we have worked diligently to develop this best practice model, which is really designed to balance that privacy versus this incredible need for public safety, because we're doing these on crimes that involve violence. And the cases that you're seeing that are being solved, or arrests are being made, I should say, are cases involving violent sexual assaults or violent murders. And so we're just really trying to stick with establishing that practice. But I'm sure Kirk can tell you about a lot of the trainings he's done as well, and Monica.
As far as the training goes, I think a lot of agencies turn to our agency because of the notoriety of the case, and Monica and I assisted Steve Kramer in the FBI on other cases as well, and so we got a little more experience. But we are by no means experts. We are still learning. Every case we do, we learn something new, and every case is different. But we've tried to, from what we've been able to learn, to assist other agencies by putting on training to really kind of get more into the nuts and bolts of how actually to do the genealogy, how to build trees, that kind of thing, so that other agencies can start doing their own cases, and because they're going to, and so hopefully get them off on the right foot to be successful.
What has the response been when you meet with these different agencies? Are they wanting to learn as much as you know, and are they really excited about this?
Oh, extremely excited! Yeah, they're very, very enthusiastic, and they're ready to go. They're chomping at the bit because they've had, just like us, they've had these cases that they've had for years that they haven't been able to solve, and they see that it meets the criteria that they can do it, and so they're very anxious to get going on it.
I think the other thing, when you ask about what's the reaction, these cases that we're seeing where there's arrests being made are cases that have often sat because they've done everything they thought they could do. And so now you have what I called, it's hope, right? It's hope. And it's not just the excitement of the investigators, but imagine how that family that, wondered whether their child's case ever be solved. There's a case back in back east of an 8-year-old little girl who's kidnapped, raped, and murdered, named April Tinsley. It's a horrific crime, and not only did they solve the case using genetic genealogy, but the guy pled just within the last couple weeks, and is now going to do life in prison. And so I'm confident that it was, those types of results are bringing tremendous relief. That's the best word I would use. But so I'm sure there are countless, thousands. I mean, there's thousands of cold cases across this country. Thousands. Not all of them will be will you have this opportunity, but some will. And that's where you get these people like Kirk and Monica that are so passionate and persistent, and they're going to find the evidence if it exists. And so I think the word hope is something that can really describe how oftentimes people feel now about this.
So what now? Are Kirk and Monica, are you continuing to do this work, not only assisting other offices, but for our office as well?
Yeah, we assist other agencies on cases both here in the local area as well as outside the area, even outside the state, because we're willing to help anybody that wants to pursue this, because we want to make sure that this technology is used properly, and as D.A. Schubert was saying, that we kind of pass the word on how to do best practices. And we've come up with a sample MOU for other agencies to hopefully utilize, so we all are consistent on how we utilize this technology. So, yeah, we're continuing to both work cases as well as to help train other agencies as well.
And they're doing a lot of that after hours, and they're never going to tell you that.
It's kind of addicting.
It's typical that they're doing it at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on a Saturday night or whatever they're doing, and it's not like they're getting paid extra for that. They're just doing it because, and they're not going to say this, but they're doing it because they're passionate and they're very good at this. And I think they realized that this process has opened up this avenue of hope for so many people, and they're good at what they do. And Steve Kramer and Melissa and they're good at what they're doing, and there's so many more out there.
What was it like to be a part of something so new and, as Anne-Marie says, revolutionary in crime, in fighting crime? What did it mean to all of you?
Well, I feel very lucky that Paul Holes, asked us to assist him in that endeavor, and that we've been able to learn so much and help other agencies and ultimately help victims, get some answers in their cases.
To this day, it's still, I have to kind of tell myself sometimes it's not a dream, that this really did happen. And Monica and my involvement in the Golden State Killer case was, you know, the last couple years of the investigation, where other investigators have worked almost their entire career, you know, on that case. You know, I've said this before, but everybody has moved the ball forward in that case that has worked on it.
I think for me, I mean, it's all of it together. It's this concept of teamwork. It's this concept of, you know, we stand up for victims. We don't ever forget. And it's really, to me, the years that so many people have spent on some of these cases, it's a testament to persistence and passion, obviously. You know, how do I feel about these cases in general? I think this is a moment in time that I know I'm never going to forget. It's just, I mean, I just know that. I'll never forget it because for years, victims have believed that they would never know answers or never have any kind of justice or whatever, whichever case it is. But it is revolutionary. There's no question about that.